Open truck, give it out to you. Puddles from my feet, just splash how you move. I can show you groove, just the way we dance. I can spit game that could put you in a trance. I don't want a cat, baby girl, I won't lie. You could tell by my walk that I think I'm that guy. I ain't even tripping, I'm the smoothest in the land. Come over to my side, you my #1 fan. If I see your name pop up on the screen, I'ma shoot my shot, I'ma splash it like green. I can tell you looking, you been through the whole team. Tryna find a star, but you better live a dream. You implying on me, I can see it in your eyes. Thought you was the angel, you the devil in disguise. You can't cut me off, I got too much pride. Time I cut her off, she broke down and cried.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning into the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival. My name is Esther Castillo, and I am a programming volunteer for PATH. And I will be moderating today's Q&A with the filmmakers of our shorts program, Yello. We'll be taking audience questions, so type your questions in the comment section. So my first question is for the director, King. My question is, what drew you into Michelle's story? What made you feel so compelled to tell her story?
So I first heard about Michelle's story. I think it was like last year. It was like before San Francisco shut down the city. Michelle was on a trip back from her hometown, and we had like a group chat like every week, like Wednesday night, and then Michelle just kind of like poured out her heart. She said, "Hey, I wrote something, and can I like share this with the group?" And they were like, "Sure." And then she started like sharing her experience at the airport, and I just remember like kind of had tears in my eyes. And I remember just messaging Michelle afterwards, say, "Wow, it was really powerful. Thank you for being so vulnerable." And I think it was like a month later that I was kind of just itching for like something creative to do. And I want to make a story that means a lot to me. And then so I reached out to Michelle and asked if she wanted to be a part of this, but that means that she would have to share your story to like the whole world. And she was kind of like nervous at first, but then she said yes after. So thank God for her openness to share her story. And the rest is history. Yeah.
Thank you. So when I was watching the film, I felt really sad just listening to the story, and I was so surprised by Michelle's approach to what happened to her, because what happened to her was apparently racist, right? And at the end of the story, it was mentioned that she saw this little boy with the most beautiful smile, and she was like, "Okay, I feel better now." So I think my next question is for Michelle. Like, how do you find that forgiveness and compassion just to move on, or did you move on?
Yeah, good question. So thankfully I had like a 3-hour flight to like mull over and think about, everything that happened. I think at first I was just really confused. Like I really didn't think much of it, but I was like, it is bothering me that like, just the looks that I got, and just kind of that feeling of like, okay, so they looked at me, they kind of like gave me a weird look, and then they ran away. So then I was like, okay, what did I do? I don't know. I was really confused, which then led to like sitting on the plane and just reflecting, okay, honey, let me think, like, why is this bothering me? What can I do with this information? And like, what is it really boiling down to? Is it really like me just focusing on myself? Did I but then I think what it really came down to was thinking more about that little girl and kind of feeling sorry for her. Like, wow, this is how she's going to grow up, seeing this example of her mom, like people that look different than us, we're going to be wary of them. So I think when I started seeing it from her perspective, that's what changed my perspective of like, okay, it's not just about me. There's a bigger story going on here. there's like, you know, something that's beyond my own experience. So seeing that little boy in the airport kind of, you know, kind of led to a point of healing of like, hey, there's a lot of like little kids out there who are looking up to the adults. Right. Granted, at that time, this was like the very beginning of COVID, like right before everything like kind of shut down. And just like thinking about like these kids are growing up with this pandemic and everything, like they're going to be looking up to their parents, to their adult figures, you know, their aunties and uncles. Just like say like, what do we do when we are scared? What do we do when we don't know like what's going on? Like, do we just react in fear, or like are there other ways to respond?
Thank you. Are you still angry at the mom?
No, you know what? At first I was like, what? Like, yeah, maybe a little bit at first, to be honest. But now I feel sorry for her. You know, I don't know what her experiences were in her past. So hopefully she has more positive experiences with, you know, people that look different than her. But yeah, I was just like, for me, it was just like, if someone were to ask her, like, why did you run away? What could she say? Like, oh, it's because she's Asian. Well, then she'll have to say like, yeah, I am racist, you know, or she'll say like, oh, she just smiled at me funny and said hello. Then, you know, that look, I don't know.
Thank you for your vulnerability. And I think the next question would be for both King and Michelle. And I know, King, just now you said that when you heard Michelle's story, you felt really sad and you felt like this need to tell her story. So I think my question is, what do you want the audience to get from this project, and also who are the imagined audiences? Is it white audiences? Is it other AAPI? Is it other people of color? Do you want them to get different messages upon hearing this story? What are your hopes? I hear Michelle thinking about the kid, right? The child, and feeling sad for her. So I guess my question is like, what do you want people to take away from?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think when I set out to make this film, I was just trying to kind of stay true to Michelle's experience, and I do like her point of view of like thinking about the kid instead of being negative, feeling negative towards the experience. She kind of found a way to connect to like other people like around her, like in our community, to for example, like other people of colors that she faces on a daily basis. So I guess I mean, I kind of make this film for myself too, because I think when the pandemic hits, I would like go out for a run, or like I would just go up to like shop for groceries. And most of the time I could feel like, because of my skin color or like my features, people would kind of like be afraid of me. So I guess like if they could like watch this film, or kind of just like talk to like other Asians like during this time, I think we could like reach the agreement that it's a pandemic, like everyone is scared. We're all humans. And it's okay, but like we have to like fight this in a more kinder way, kind of like in Michelle's way, so that we have hope for the future.
Yeah, I think just even like for people of color to just share their experiences. Like when I first shared it with King, I really was like, I don't even know if this is worth sharing, King, but this is like what I experienced. And the outpour of like love from other people that's like, hey, I've experienced this myself, and I just never put words to it before. And to know that like just to speak up, like I had this experience, anyone else, and then just start having that conversation, having that dialogue, and just see where it goes from there.
Thank you. I'm glad you spoke up. This is so worth sharing. So thank you. And so I'm going to ask this final question. So how can we find your work and connect with you?
So my website is iamking.com. So IAMK7NG. So instead of King, it's at K7NG.com. I don't have Instagram or anything else, so you can find my work out there. Yeah, or just try to find me on LinkedIn by typing my name.
Thank you so much, King and Michelle. It's been a pleasure just talking to you. I love that really short film, and just like it touched my heart in so many ways. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having us.
Hi, so thank you for tuning in, and we're gonna now move to the Q&A section with director Chang for his film Wuhan Wuhan. So thank you for joining us. You go by Yong, is it?
That's correct.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I think my first question was that this really general question of what drew you into taking this really brave project, because like throughout the whole process when I was watching the film, I was like, oh my god, I cannot believe like somebody's shooting this, like so you must have felt really compelled in order to do a project like this, because it's really risky as well for you. So I guess my question is like, what motivate you to do this?
Sure. I mean, there's a little bit of backstory there. I was I was working remotely from Toronto, where we're connected here now from, and I inherited the footage that was filmed by the film crew in February and March of 2020. That was a whole separate kind of direction crew that followed these 9 characters, originally 9 different storylines, and then I was later brought in as the director to put everything together, sort of like mold the material into a cohesive kind of story. And so my experience came a little bit thereafter the actual experience of the crew, but I can tell you a little bit about what they had to go through. The crew of 40 were in Wuhan at the time, making a film, or in pre-production for a film about the Yangtze River, and then they were locked in, and as a result, they used their resources and their press credentials to pivot and then focus their crew following 9 different storylines, and so they worked very carefully. I know it was, Wuhan as a story is quite a sensitive subject matter, and so they had to work very carefully, very sensitively, and building the access and connections to be able to tell the stories that they focused on. And then after 2-3 months of shooting, that was all, as we say in the film parlance, it was in the can, and that came over to me in April of 2020, where then I stepped in and kind of put it all together with the help of a huge team of collaborators, editors, et cetera, producers, and my team of editors were based in Los Angeles while I worked in Toronto.
Thank you so much for the backstory. So that was a lot of footage to comb through.
300 hours is a lot of footage. I think it's about as much as I would film in one of my own feature productions. As a film director, I'm usually the one on location, and I'm usually the one who's there and kind of knows all the ins and outs of what it took to get the footage in the can. And in my process, it's usually the step where you then, as a director, I would then, with my material, after how many years of filming, I would bring this material to a trusted editor, and then I would hand over the footage, and then I would step away. In fact, that would be the only time where I kind of consciously take a imposed holiday so that I kind of allow the editor to sift through the footage and come up with what they believe to be the best kind of what is the best scenes, and I try to stay kind of as neutral as possible. They know the direction, they know what I want to make, and so they take that in mind. They keep the themes, the structure kind of in mind, and they work off of sort of creating what we call an assembly. And but in this instance, and basically it's because I'm too close to the footage. I can't see the trees from the forest. You know what I mean? And it's helpful to have distance. It really is. It gives you perspective and have fresh eyes. To have someone have fresh eyes on the images, and as a director, it gives you some space from the material. But in this instance, it was complete opposite. I firstly was quite cautious about jumping into the material because I've never done this kind of thing before, where I would have to work remotely and with somebody else's material. But after watching, I asked the Starlight Media, the production company, to send me some footage to look at. They sent me 10 hours of raw footage, and I was immediately struck how impactful, emotional, powerful the material was, and very in line with how I think I would approach the filmmaking if I were to be there, which is on this humanistic kind of approach rather than any other kind of method. This observational approach is very much in line with what I would make. And so I was struck by the images, and I decided that immediately, like, okay, I'm down for this. And then when I dove into the material itself, it really felt like I was sort of like an editor, a de facto editor, and I could easily make ruthless decisions. There was no precious feeling about material that wasn't strong enough to serve the purpose of the story, and I could very effortlessly kind of say, we don't need this. And so we knew we had to get it down to at least 5 storylines, and that's what we got it down to: 5 stories, and struck away the other 4, and that was sort of how we kind of dove into it. And it was such a great experience, actually, working with my editors, all of whom were Chinese American or Chinese nationals based in America. Very positive experience. I think we were all on the same page. Do you know what I mean?
Thank you for sharing that. Two follow-up questions from what you just told me. You said that it's very different from the projects that you were doing before, because you kind of took on the editor role, so you can make these ruthless decisions of what to cut, right? How do you feel about that? Is it a positive thing? Is it a negative thing? Did you feel ambivalent about it? So that's my first question. Second question, you talked about there were 9 characters. How did you make those decisions of who made those 5?
Yeah, I mean, I think it as an adjustment for me. Firstly, there was the adjustment of having to work remotely. Usually I'm in the editing suite with the editors or editor and working with them hands-on. This was very different. I'm in my home office. It's the beginning of the pandemic. So everything was sort of an adjustment. But I found that if anything, it just sort of doubled down on my feeling that an editor is just as important as a director in their process, and you kind of have to it becomes a very difficult process if you can't put a trust into what they bring and why you decided to work with that editor creatively. And I think I've benefited tremendously in my career, having gone into any film with the understanding that in order to make something, you need to understand that it's collaborative, unless you're some what is the word? I can't say the word now. Narcissist, and you can edit and do everything yourself. I can't do that. It's just I'm not cut from that cloth. So I've learned early on with my first film, Up the Yangtze, that I learned that it was necessary to work collaboratively. given that, and given that I was kind of approaching it more like an editor rather than really the responsibility I had was to piece the film together. So without the knowledge going into it, what it was going to be. So I kind of looked at the footage as found footage, sort of like I wanted to treat it like material that has no context, and I could put the context by just seeing what is coming across in the screen, and so so that was felt liberating in many ways. It really was that's why I think it was such a positive experience, and we weren't hindered by the kind of what I know is the process for me as a director is usually this kind of slow reckoning with the footage and being like, oh, these are the darlings I have to kill. That's often a very challenging thing. But in this instance, was like, that's a good scene, but not strong enough. Blah blah blah. So to go to your second question, the reason why we landed on these 5 characters was because they were the strongest in terms of what they could give to the story, and if anything kind of had mirroring themes or similar kind of story beats, then it was easy to just say we can't do it. And so the strongest story arc for me was the young couple, the volunteer driver and his partner, and their expectant the expectant partner with the baby, and to know that we had that material, which is the most for me the most powerful material, just emotionally and humanistically. That was the stuff that I really connected to. And so I think off the top, the editors and I understood that the theme of the film would revolve around this shared humanity that we wanted to get across, because circling around us in April 2020 through that summer was a lot of this anti-Asian hate and racism, and something of which I experienced directly the week before I signed on to the film. Coincidentally, my daughter and I, in the city of Toronto, which is considered the most diverse city in the world, had an incident just around the corner in my neighborhood, and it was heartbreaking, actually. And I carried that kind of emotional resonance, that kind of pain into the filmmaking process for this film, and really early on established the theme that it wouldn't be about politics, it wouldn't be about divisiveness. This film would be about giving a kind of a heartbeat, a face to the city of Wuhan that was kind of dragged through the dirt for just being the sheer fact that it was the epicenter of the virus, and yet it is a thriving cultural hub. There's a vibrant art scene and a punk music culture. In fact, the composers of the film, Hualun, Hualun, they've got a Bandcamp. I would highly recommend listening to their music. I got into their music because of a film they had done called An Elephant Sitting Still, by a wonderful film a groundbreaking film from China about 3-4 years ago. Anyway, they're from Wuhan. And so I really wanted that to be a part of the process, get a Wuhanese band, get the Wuhanese calligrapher to do the calligraphy in the film, all of that stuff. So yeah, I'm losing. Maybe I've digressed, but it really was collaborative process. It was identifying early on the theme of the film, which is this. It was a quote, in fact, from a Japanese official that wrote a letter to a Chinese official in the 7th century, that we may be separated by mountains and waters, yet above us we share the same sky and the same feelings. And that was what we kind of was our mantra every time we were wavered in our direction. That would be the we would say, remember that. And that's how we made that film.
Thank you so much. And I'm so sorry for what happened to you and your daughter. I myself experienced some racist comments too during the pandemic. And I think it's hard for Asian Americans and just Asians around the globe to have that stigma. And I just wanted also to comment on when I was watching Wuhan Wuhan. I know the city was hugely stigmatized. And personally, I have never been to Wuhan. And never seen, I have seen some pictures on the news about Wuhan, but I didn't really see the city. And I really appreciated the way you showed the city. Every time we get outside and get out of
Mm,
the hospital, I
mm,
felt like I could breathe, and I
yeah.
could breathe the air of Wuhan. And so thank you for telling that story. I think my next question would be kind of like follow up on what you commented on the anti-Asian hate, and also the timing of the film, and the fact that you were working remotely. I think two question. Because when I was watching it, I thought you really helped destigmatize Wuhan. I don't know if it was intentional or
Oh, definitely, yeah. It
okay.
was, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what I was sorry to interrupt you, and I'll let you get
Go
to your
ahead.
question, but
Yeah.
just to
Hmm.
pepper this question, I'll just answer quickly that yeah, I mean, the intention early on was to kind of go beyond the headlines that we were reading in Western media about Wuhan, where it was just relegated to the Wuhan virus. It was the Kung flu Wuhan virus, and then you see the images of the wet market, and people just think it's
Hmm.
very backwards. And even in our test screenings with the film, some of the Westerners reacted like, "Oh, I didn't believe. I thought it was just a village with exotic animal market, and that's hardly the case. So it's considered the Chicago of China, if that makes sense, and it is a very important kind of hub for commerce and also for the arts. And there's a very big university in Wuhan, and it's quite an amazing city. It's just a lot of artists. For me, that's the draw. You're in a city when there's a cultural hub as well attached to the other stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and that was exactly the impression that I got. And like you said, like a lot of the pictures I saw was like the wet market, and it was kind of heartbreaking for me because I grew up in Macau, and we
Mm,
had wet markets in Macau. I had
mm,
really fond memories of wet markets,
mm,
going with my grandmother. But like, and I thought, okay, to go back to Wuhan, like you really showed us what Wuhan looks like, and
mm,
what citizens of Wuhan are like. And so thank you for telling that story. And
mm.
that was important for me as an audience. Um, I guess the next question is also tied with this theme of uh, stigma and anti-Asian hate, and the fact that we were all isolated and you were working on this project remotely.
Mhm.
Was it emotionally hard for you to work on such a subject?
Oh,
What were the mixed emotions? Right, I see that you have this desire to want to destigmatize and tell their stories, that to show the world a different face, and to unite through storytelling. um, but I can like, what was it like for you to work in your like
yeah.
like remotely, in an isolated place, yeah, to do
Oh,
this, yeah.
I mean, we kind of roll back the clock to March 2020, right? We had just entered our lockdown in Toronto, and I think, and I had previous to that lockdown, I had finished a film and was in the festival circuit. I had just flown back from Los Angeles from a screening of a film that I made called "This Is Not a Movie," about Robert Fisk, the British Middle East correspondent. And I was ready and set to go on this long tour with the movie and the theatrical release, blah blah blah, and everything was shut down. So there was this sort of feeling of what's happening, this sort of stages of grief, the denial aspect of it too, and so entering into this footage, it was the footage from Wuhan, was almost like a prescient kind of foot into what we were about to enter. And as I began the editing in April 2020, it was, just a few weeks into our lockdown, I was seeing kind of into the mirror, you know, um, the magic mirror, and seeing what was up ahead, the challenges ahead. Uh, but I didn't realize that we would be a little bit our response would be a little slower than what China obviously had the ability to deal with. So the fact that they had completed their lockdown in July 2020 and truly have been living since then, through my colleagues and family in mainland China, it's been relatively unscathed in terms of cases and very how do we say it, pretty efficient in making sure the cases that do pop up do not spread, right? And so just having that window into the footage was an emotional process. It was difficult, really difficult to see the hospital footage that I wasn't getting any of that in Western media, at least not in the way we make cinematic documentary. The intention of cinematic documentary is to make things that are empathetic and that drive you emotionally to look at subject matter rather than be informational. For me, it's never about information. It's much more about how it makes your heart feel and your brain, how your heart reacts first, and so it was very difficult at times. And then, parallel to that, I had also begun the creation of a short film, an American film called Pandemic 19, with my partner Annie, and that film follows 3 American doctors on the front lines through their personal video diaries, and that's called Pandemic 19. And you can see it through PBS World Channel streaming now. But to have these 2 concurrent kind of stories evolving, it was like shocking, actually. Like the China story, so somewhat hopeful, and then yet the American story just the opposite, and one of the devices we use in that short film was this ticker counter of the number of cases and the number of deaths related to COVID, and at the end of the film it just counts up and up into infinity, and I think it's just shocking in terms of comparisons to China.
Yeah, well, that's hard. What pushed you through those projects? And like, it was emotionally hard. Was there things in your head or things you do that help push you through those 2 very intense projects?
Well, I think there's a sense of purpose, definitely, as a filmmaker. We kind of operate with that sense of mission, and I think it's better than. And I'm lucky. Let me just say, I know I have peers who were completely sidelined because of the pandemic and weren't able to make something, and that I think would be mentally challenging if it were to happen to me, that I didn't have something to do. I think I would really sink into a very deep and dark place. But when you have a purpose and you have work to do, and I was lucky to have that opportunity, then that was what got me through it, just the sense of purpose. And then there's this really essential element, which is the collaborative sense of filmmaking, which is I'm not working alone in a silo. I have a team of people. I have people that I talk to every day, and we share commonalities, and we have a shared goal. And I think that really helped to get through the material and the film. Yeah.
Thank you. And I see that we have a question from the audience, from Emily. So Emily said, could you talk a little bit about how different audiences have responded to the film? Has anything surprised you?
Yeah. Hi, Emily, by the way. Hi, how are you? Yeah, I think the responses to the film, it's interesting because my response to the film also evolves with the actual pandemic. I mean, this is a situation where we've made this film about the pandemic that is not resolved yet and constantly evolving. So my reaction kind of shifts and changes with the tone of the present day, if that makes sense. I think the reactions have been very, I guess, how do I say? I guess the film that I've made is the one that is sort of the humanistic, hopeful film, right? and as a result, I think it's connecting in that way, emotionally for people. That was the purpose and the intention. I could never pinpoint exactly what I wanted to get, the feeling. It was hard for me to kind of verbalize the feeling I wanted the film to give at the end. We end it with this kind of the birth of the child. There's a bit of that sense of the intonation of the cyclical nature of life and death, right? Which is, hopefully not too heavy-handed, but I do think that has resonated with audiences that I hear from, whether it be from people in New Zealand and Australia, or Greece, to my friends in Los Angeles, for example. I think the reactions have been, intimate in that way. I think everyone. I think my point is that I think people react to it the way we each individually react to how we are experiencing the pandemic.
Thank you for your answer. And just to follow up, I wonder, did you hear any responses around like how the film might have changed people's perspective about Wuhan, or like the racism surrounding the anti-Asian racism surrounding like COVID-19?
I haven't really heard specific feedback around that. My only hope is that people who do watch the film, I'm not quite sure a racist will watch Wuhan Wuhan, let's just say, unless I find out a pretty tricky technique to market it to that sect of society. So I'm not sure if we're actually converting certain individuals. That being said, I think there is a middle ground, that, for example, through the test audiences that we screened the film with, there has been that kind of resonance with people who aren't familiar with China, which I think is just the one way in sort of humanizing this often, monolith kind of vision of China, and I really wanted to cut through that as well, that there are everyday people, individuals, not unlike you and I, who experience the same emotional kind of ups and downs of this pandemic, and that's what I wanted to show through these stories, certainly through the young couple.
Thank you. And before I get to my final question, anything you want to add, anything you want to share with our audiences today?
I think just firstly, just to thank you and the festival for having the film, and for screening this film, and for sharing it with audiences. I just hope that it leaves you with a little bit of reflection, and that's the least I can ask.
Thank you so much. I enjoy watching the film, so thank you for making it. And final question: where can we find? I know you're a very prolific filmmaker. Where can we find your work and follow your work?
I think there's some of my work is on the Canopy site. So that's Kanopy, which is connected to the Library Network. I think China Heavyweight is a film about young kids in China becoming professional boxers, and or amateur boxers, with a coach who decides to go back in the ring one last time to teach his kids. That's a documentary that I made that was at Sundance in 2012. And then Up the Yangtze, also on Canopy, which was my first feature about a young boy and girl working on a farewell cruise ship on the Yangtze River before it was flooded by the Three Gorges Dam. I have other films that I guess you can just go to my website, youngfilms.com, YUNGFILMS.com, for more information about my work. Pandemic 19, again, is on World Channel. I have a film called Gatekeeper. It's a short film about a Japanese suicide saver that I made with Field of Vision. That's on their site, or Vimeo. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your work. I will definitely check out more of your work. And thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you again, Director Yong Chang, for joining us and answering my questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.